This is chapter 24, and this chapter is on nutrition, metabolism, and energy balance, but this talk is going to focus on nutrition. So why this matters. Understanding the process of how the body converts nutrients into energy can help you effectively advise your patients on dietary choices that will allow their bodies to operate at peak performance. So a nutrient is a substance in food needed for growth, maintenance, and repair. Most nutrients are going to be used for metabolic fuel, but some are used for cell structures and molecular synthesis. Then we have the term macronutrients. And these are three major nutrients that make up the bulk of ingested food, and they're carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. We also have micronutrients, and these are two other nutrients that are required, but only in small amounts. And these are our vitamins and minerals. And water is required, so technically it is a nutrient. Then we have the term essential nutrients, and these are nutrients that we have to eat because our bodies cannot synthesize these from other nutrients. 45 to 50 nutrients are considered essential. Non-essential nutrients are also vital to life. However, if there's not enough available, usually our liver can convert another nutrient into the one that's needed. And then energy value is measured in kilocalories, and a calorie is the amount of heat needed to raise temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree centigrade, and 1 dietary calorie equals 1 kilocalorie. The USDA has something called MyPlate, and this is just basically a guideline that is represented as portions on a plate. And the food groups that are represented are fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. And the basic dietary principles are eat only what you need and eat less overall. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and avoid junk food like pizza and ice cream. So this is USDA's MyPlate, and we can see a little bit less than a quarter is taken up by fruit, a little bit more than a quarter taken up by vegetable, a little bit less than a quarter taken up by protein, and a little bit more than a quarter taken up by grain, and then we have a side of dairy. So carbohydrates, we have the dietary sources, primarily from plants, such as starch in grains and vegetables. We also have sugars, mono and disaccharides in fruits, sugar cane, sugar beets, honey, and milk. And then there's two different types of fiber. There's insoluble fiber, and this would be like cellulose in vegetables that provides roughage, and soluble fiber like pectin in apples and citrus fruits that helps to reduce blood cholesterol levels. And there's also a small amount in milk sugar and also glycogen in meats. The uses in the body. So glucose is going to be the fuel that's most used by cells to make ATP. We're going to get into metabolism in the next video, and you're going to see that everything, we always talk about glucose. And there's a reason for it, and that's because of the fact that it's the fuel that's most used by cells to make the ATP. Some cells use fat for energy. However, we do have some cells that rely entirely on glucose, like neurons and red blood cells. In fact, neurons die quickly without glucose. Excess glucose is converted to glycogen or fat and then stored. And fructose and galactose are converted to glucose by the liver before entering circulation. We have some dietary requirements. The daily intake should be somewhere between 45 to 65% of total calories. They should consist mostly of complex carbohydrates, whole grains, and vegetables. Simple carbohydrates like drinking soda and stuff like that should be limited. High amounts of sugars can lead to obesity as well as nutritional deficiency. And the American diet's about 46% carbohydrate, and that's going to include rice, pasta, bread, and they tend to be inexpensive, so higher percentages are seen in low income groups. And just what that means is For people who have less money to spend on food, carbohydrates tend to be a less expensive option than proteins and lipids. So you may see a higher percentage of carbohydrates being consumed by somebody in a low income home. Possibly, not necessarily, but possibly. So we have our summary of carbohydrates here. Trying to get a cursor. Okay, so we have our complex carbohydrates: bread, cereal, crackers, flour, pasta, rice, potatoes. Simple carbohydrates are sugars, right? Stuff in soda, candy, fruit, ice cream. We should take in about 45 to 65%, or 45 to 65% of our total caloric intake should be carbohydrate. Lipids. So we have our dietary sources. Triglycerides are the most abundant form, and they're found in saturated fats and meat, dairy foods, tropical oils, or hydrogenated oils. Unsaturated fats found in seeds, nuts, olive oil, and most vegetable oils. And then cholesterol found in egg yolk, meat, organ meat, shellfish, and milk products. Liver makes about 85% of the cholesterol, which means that we get about 15% from our diet. Now, I am not going to ask you to remember every single item that has cholesterol for the exam. I just would like you to know some examples of where we find cholesterol and find saturated fats and find unsaturated fats. The liver can convert some fatty acids into others, but there are two essential fatty acids that it cannot synthesize. And we have linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, and this is a component of lecithin, and linolenic acid, which is an omega-3 fatty acid, and both can be found in most vegetable oils. There's a number of uses in the body. So going back to ANP1, adipose tissue provides protection, insulation, fuel storage, phospholipids. I'm sure you remember we find those in the cell membrane. They're also essential in myelin sheaths. Cholesterol helps to stabilize cell membranes against temperature changes. It's also a precursor of bile salts and steroid hormones. Prostaglandins cause smooth muscle contraction, blood pressure control, inflammation. Lipids are a major fuel of hepatocytes and skeletal muscle. And lipids also help absorb fat-soluble vitamins. Fat should represent 20 to 35% of total caloric intake, and saturated fat should be limited to 10% or less of total fat intake. Cholesterol is not required in the diet, and the intake of cholesterol should actually be kept as low as possible, especially for those people who have high blood cholesterol levels, because this has been associated with cardiovascular disease. So we have our different essential fatty acids down here. We also have cholesterol. Again, most of it is made in the body, but a little bit of it is brought in by our diet. 20 to 35% of total caloric intake should come from lipids. Proteins. Dietary sources include animal products, eggs, milk, fish. Most meats, as well as soybeans, are considered complete proteins. And complete proteins are proteins that contain all needed essential amino acids. Legumes, nuts, and cereals contain incomplete proteins because they lack some essential amino acids. Legumes and cereal grains together contain all the essential amino acids. So we have 8 essential amino acids here. They're listed down to there. And you can see that corn and other grains cover 6 of them. Beans and other legumes cover another 6. There's a little bit of overlap here, but all 8 of them are covered. And this would be particularly important to somebody who is a vegetarian or a vegan. Uses in the body. So we have structural materials like keratin in the skin, collagen and elastin in connective tissue, and muscle protein. They also act as functional molecules like enzymes and some hormones. And then there's 3 factors that help determine whether whether amino acids are used to synthesize proteins or they're burned as fuel. And the first is the all or none rule. All amino acids need to be present for protein synthesis to occur. If they're not all present, then the amino acids are then going to be used for energy. Then we have adequacy of caloric intake. If there's insufficient carbohydrate or fat available, then protein will be used as fuel. And then we have hormonal controls. Anabolic hormones like growth hormone and sex hormones, I should say, accelerate protein synthesis and growth. Adrenal glucocorticoids, I can't talk right now, that are released during stress promote protein breakdown and the conversion of amino acids to glucose. And then we have nitrogen balance. And this is a homeostatic state where the rate of protein synthesis is going to equal the rate of breakdown and loss. And so we have two different types of nitrogen balance here. We have positive and negative. Positive nitrogen balance is where synthesis exceeds breakdown. And this is going to be normal in children, pregnant women, tissue repair. And negative nitrogen balance, this is where breakdown exceeds synthesis. Examples would be stress. We just talked about that, right? Glucocorticoids cause this to break down. So stress, burns, infection, injury, poor dietary proteins, starvation. And then dietary requirements, the needs reflect age, size, metabolic rate, and nitrogen balance. The rule of thumb, though, is to take in about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, and the American diet provides more than what's needed. So we have our complete proteins, our eggs, milk products, meat. Incomplete proteins would be legumes, nuts, seeds, grains, cereals. And then 12 to 20% of total caloric intake should come from protein. But again, the rule of thumb is about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now we're going to go over the role of vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are organic compounds that are crucial in helping the body use nutrients. Most function as coenzymes, and most must be ingested, except vitamin D is made in the skin, and some B and K is synthesized by intestinal bacteria, and then beta-carotene is converted in the body to vitamin A. No one food group contains all vitamins. We have two different types of vitamins based on solubility. We have water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. B complex and C are absorbed with water. B12, if you remember back from chapter, now my chapters are getting blurry. We talked about this several times, I think a little bit in chapter 17 and then again later in the gastrointestinal chapter. But vitamin B12 absorption requires intrinsic factor. Water-soluble vitamins are not stored in the body. Anything that's not used within an hour is excreted, which just means that if you take a huge dose of vitamin C, whatever is not used within 1 hour is just going to be urinated out. Then we have fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, and these are going to be absorbed with lipid digestion products, and they're going to be stored in the body except for vitamin K. And excessive consumption can actually cause health problems. And there's going to be a table in a moment that I'll show you that you can see some of the health problems that can occur with excessive consumption of vitamins. Vitamins are a good thing, but you definitely can take too many or too much. Dangerous free radicals are generated during normal metabolism. Vitamins C, E, and A, and mineral selenium are antioxidants that neutralize these free radicals. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts are all good sources of vitamin A and C, and megadoses of vitamins are useless and may actually cause serious health problems depending upon the vitamin involved. So we have this table here, and you can see some of these vitamins, and when it's in pink, that means if there's extreme excess. Too much, B3, can cause liver damage. We go down a little bit further, we have something even worse. Too much vitamin D can cause brain, cardiovascular, and kidney damage. Too much vitamin K, liver damage, and anemia. And you can see there's several other examples as well. There are 7 minerals that are required in moderate amounts: calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, and magnesium. Others are required in trace amounts, and they work with nutrients to ensure proper body functioning. Uptake and excretion are balanced to prevent toxic overload. And some examples of uses in the body would be calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium salts harden bone. Iron is essential for oxygen binding to hemoglobin. That goes back to chapter 17 again. Iodine is necessary for thyroid hormone synthesis. That goes back to chapter 16. Sodium and chloride are major electrolytes in the blood. Mineral-rich foods include vegetables, legumes, milk, and some meats. And this is a table of the minerals in the body, the major dietary sources, the major functions, and symptoms of deficiency. You do not have to memorize this table. And I did mention about the vitamin table, but you do not need to memorize that vitamin table either. But I just wanted to leave it up here so you can just kind of take a look at it. These are your questions. That's all I have for you for this talk.